Kia ora whānau, I just thought I'd do an update video. Again, we're looking at an apron that I purchased off Trade Me. This is not paid to Hurinui Jones's. This is not his apron, but it is very, very similar. The similarity, well, it's actually identical. In this instance here, we have, was pointed out to me by my informant last night in our conversation, that that it has 3 rosettes, which means that this mason that owned this particular apron was a 3rd degree mason. So I was told by my informant that Peter Hurinui Jones, that I got the information wrong, but according to his research, Peter Hurinui Jones indeed was a 3rd degree mason, meaning he was a master mason. Now the ceremony that a master mason goes through is called the raising up ceremony. Those of you who have read Tuhi Maere Kura and know about the kingitanga and have read the book Pota Tauta Whero Whero will see the similarities in the description of that ceremony. And Pei calls it the raising up ceremony. Okay, well, it's not called the raising up ceremony in John Gorst's book, but Pei calls it the raising up ceremony. So there has to be some sort of influence from Freemasonry there. Now I haven't looked at it deeper, but my informant will spend a week next week to study Tuhi Maere Kura, to look at the connections, how deep those Freemasonic influences go in his kōrero, which I find is interesting. It's something we have to get a grip on, so that we can appreciate the author, Peter Hurinui Jones, so that we can appreciate his writings, appreciate where he was coming from, what he was thinking, but also to try to decipher how far the Freemasonic influence goes and where it stops in his writings, Tuhi Maere Kura. In my other video I talked about this drawing done by Peter Hurinui Jones. I got a few things wrong here. At the bottom here, this is not Ranganui or Tamaku, but this second tier here is Tauranga. He's got it the way of the multitude, which is interesting. We find a parallel there in Wairarapa Kōrero, in the temple called Hawaiki, which is found in Tauranga, and it has 4 doors facing the cardinal directions. On the east door it's called Te Ara Whānui, or Tāne, meaning the broad way of Tāne. Now Tāne does not figure greatly here in this kōrero or in the Tainui Wharewananga itself, but Tāwhaki does. Now you can fit a multitude down a broad way, but you can't fit a multitude through a narrow way, which is another term of the way to heaven that Tāne took. And that comes from Tūhoi, and they called it Te Ara Tawhaiti, or Te Ara Whaiti, Tauwhaiti, sorry, Te Ara Tauwhaiti, or Tāne, meaning the narrow way, or the narrow passage, or the difficult way to the heavens, which to me is very similar to the pathway that Tāwhaki climbed. And this is the representation here. He's got Te Toi Huareo. If you know your Tāwhaki pūrākau, then you would recognise this name. And this is the suspended way, or the vine that was connected to the heavens, and it was also connected and rooted into the earth. Therefore, was very, very stable. And it goes down the middle of this pyramid. But when it comes to aka, or vines, you can only have one person going at a time. You can't have multitudes going up unless they're behind in single file. Okay, it's not like the broad way here. The broad way, where a lot of people can fit through at a single time. Here you've got only one person can go at a time in single file. You had, on the other hand, you had Karahi, his brother, who climbed another aka, but that aka was attached to heaven, but it was not attached to the earth. That vine obviously is Tāne Mahuta, the cosmic tree. My interpretation there, there's not Tainui kōrero, neither it's Pei's kōrero. Here you've got Te Angi Tamatane and Te Angi Tamawahine. This is the way here. He's got here the females ascend heaven on this side of the pyramid, and on this side is the males line of ascension to Tiki Tiki Orangi, the very top of the heavens. Now note that these are not Tainui names. He's got an interesting interpretation here, which I'm going to investigate further. But these are not Tainui names. This is from the law of the Whare Wānanga. Okay. Now, if we, I spoke about orientation. If we're looking at this from our perspective, the males are on the left and the female climbs to the right. But that's not the orientation. The orientation is from Eel's perspective, which is looking this way. So the male's actually on his right and the female's on his left hand side. It does not denigrate females because they come up the left. So don't mix up biblical and scriptural representations of the left hand. Those on Christ's left hands are hypocrites, those who are boastful, prideful, and they're the goats. And they get thrust down to hell. This is not how you to interpret this kōrero. It does not diminish females at all. In fact, the females in many tribes were the holder of the kōrero, but we've lost a lot of their kōrero because it's been dominated by the males. Now, how do we know for certain that the orientation is from Eel's perspective this way? Well, if we were to say with some confidence that this is borrowed, this type of drawing and its format is borrowed from Freemasonry, then we go back to Freemasonry and have a look. If we go back to the certificate, we see here again, we see the step pyramid. Okay, and then we see at the top the square, the compass and the square. But if we go to the top again, we see the all-seeing eye. The all-seeing eye of the grand architect of the universe. The individual, which is from my background being a Mormon, God the Father or Christ. But here, because it's Freemasonic, it can be anyone. But they say the grand architect of the universe, and he is looking directly at us. So that's the orientation. He's at the top here. Okay, then go down above. He's above all this other symbolism here in iconography. Here's some other examples of the pyramid from Freemasonry. This piece of artwork displays the different branches of Freemasonry that a Freemason can go or can branch out to after they've finished the 3 degrees of the Blue Lodge. And you'll see here at the very top again the square and the compass at the apex. Just of a side note, side interest, these are the blueprint drawings of the Nauvoo temple, and you'll see here the square and the compass again. Right, where else do we see the pyramid? Of course, the most famous iconographic representation from Freemasonry, from the $1 bill. This is the Great Seal. Conspiracy theorists have a field day with this. It's a conspiracy theorist wet dream. But here we have the all-seeing eye. Again, it's looking at us. This is the rays of the rays of the sun, or the rays of knowledge that are dispensed from the all-seeing eye. If that were the sun rises in the east, so the orientation is this way. Again, here's the step pyramid that we see, very similar to this, and this obviously represents US history. This represents the tiers here of the 13 states of America. I've seen other interpretations which are just rubbish and completely made up and arbitrary. And it says a nunc cooptus, meaning that the grand architect accepts what's going on here, the novus ordo seclorum, the new order of the ages. Meaning going from monarchy to republicanism. So the question I have to ask as a side note is if what would happen to America if they didn't separate from Britain? So all the conspiracy theorists need to think about that. Alright, so that's basically it. I think there's one more thing I was going to talk about. Yes, I was. On the other video I talked about the Kawanga ceremony that was done by Tarangi Taho. Some further information about him. He hung out with Te Kote, and he was a great warrior. The saying is the warrior of 100 wolves. He was expert in his craft, which was dispensing death to those that got in his way. He was 6'4". No, he was 6'2". At this stage he was in his 80s. This is him at the top of the Hurinui at Whakarewarewa. This ceremony happened in 1900, and James Cohen was the main reporter of the day, and he pulled Te Rangi Taho aside and spoke to him a little bit about I asked him a few questions, but here's a artist's rendition of that event, and this is the kawa, or kawanga ceremony, the dedication consecration of a new building, which is a Hurinui, which has just been built or refurbished, sorry. And here, which is very, very unusual, I've never ever seen this before, but we have he asked the fire to be built, and later on in the ceremony he asked for kumara to be chucked on, to be cooked, so that they could eat it, and eat it inside the marae and whakanoa the place. But this ceremony is to whakanoa, to take the tapu away from this place, so it can be used for daily use, for profane uses. They're not sacred. Had this not been whakanoa'd, there'd be too many violations. The common people would make too many violations and upset the atua, so it had to be whakanoa'd. But like I said, this is extremely unusual. I have never ever seen a kawana ceremony where the tohunga went to the top of the Hurinui and uttered his karakia. Now James Cohen said he climbed this ladder. Remember, this joker at Te Rangi Taho is 80 years old. He comes from Tupare Toa. In fact, I think he's whanaunga, because he comes from Te Oroanui, just outside Taupo. And his right foot is hanging over the right side of the Hurinui. Remember, if we were facing this direction, we would think that it was the left side. It isn't. It's the right side. The orientation is this way. I'm not too sure if this is facing east, but that would be perfect. That would be the perfect direction. How do I know that's his right side? Because James Cohen said that his right leg hung over the right side of the Hurinui. Now let's look at the cosmological significance of this. Ngāpuhi, now I know this is not Ngāpuhi, this is Te Aroa, right? Rotorua. But Ngāpuhi says they've got a saying there, whakatauki, which is the ranganui, the sky, is the roof of the house of Ngāpuhi. It's the same thing as said of Ngāti Raukawa. They say exactly the same thing. But note, he's at tiki tiki, in my opinion, he's at tiki tiki orangi, the top. He's at the apex here, uttering his kōrero in a similitude of Eo. Ngāi Tahu said that Eo had sung the creation into existence. The Hurinui itself represents the creation. Outside is Te Pō, inside is Te Ao Marama, the land, the world of light. Anyway, my battery is going flat, so I'll just wrap this up. In this instance, he'd be here, at the top. I know that's my interpretation and not anyone's going to agree with it. But there you go. Alright, I'll see you in another video. Cheers. Bye.